Today's stuff we're going to be learning is Ketubot Daf Lamed Vav. I'm excited to announce that I'll be speaking in Denver this evening, so I'll be teaching actually tomorrow's daf. And thank you in advance to the Andorskis who will be hosting the Shiur, and also to the Fishmans who will be hosting a Shiur I'll be giving on Shabbat afternoon in Denver. And if you're around, so come listen. It's all sponsored by the Denver Kihila. My husband will be speaking there also over the weekend, so we're really looking forward to a nice weekend. So thank you to our hosts. And thank you to the Fishman and the Andorskis in advance. Okay, and for those who are coming, just a reminder, the Shiur will be, I'll be teaching tomorrow's daf, Friday's daf. Okay. Today's daf is sponsored by the Maybaum, Ray, and Cohen families in loving memory of Miriam Mim Cohen, Miriam Bat Michael on her Shloshim, our kind-hearted, fun-loving, and totally unique big sister, devoted wife and mother, ardent Zionist and proud Jew. We miss you. Okay, we're going to get started on our daf at the bottom of Lamed Hamud Bet. We saw a Braita, started with a Braita that talked about arayot, ushniot l'arayot, have no knas and not pitoy. Okay, there's a few cases in this Braita. We're going to go one by one, so I'll just review the first case. So if a man rapes a woman who was forbidden to him for one of the forbidden relationships, here it just sounds like any forbidden relationship, and even a rabbinic one, that's usually shniot la'arayot, doesn't pay the knas. To which the Gemara asks, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. So starting from two lines from the bottom of Lamed Hamud Bet, my arayot, umay shniot la'arayot, ilema arayot mamash, and shniot are midivrei sofrim. If you're going to say that arayot means what I just said, any forbidden arayot from the Torah, and shniot is any rabbinic ones. Wait, the whole reason why you don't pay knas is because of the law of kimle. Kimle doesn't work if you did something that's rabbinic on a Torah level. You're not obligated to anything. It's only rabbinic. And then you're obligated by Torah law, knas. You can't have something that's rabbinic override the payment of knas. That makes no sense. Ela arayot must be chayve mito beitin. And shniot is chayve krito. We're going to have two possible answers. The first one is to say that arayot is chayve mito beitin, once that you get penalty by the hands of the court. And shniot means not shniot normally what we mean. Secondary meaning they're only chayav karet. Okay. The karet is less serious, but yes, we saw there was a bit of a difference between them. You won't get death in this, right? In this world, by the hands of man. So shniot are chayve krito. And then, aval chayve lavim. Now, what's excluded? Chayve lavim. If it's a lo taseh like mamzer, right, or some sort of arayot that's only a lo taseh, right, all the different forbidden relations like almana lekohen gadol and those kind, well, yesh lem knas. Then if somebody, there was a rape case like that, you would pay knas. Umanu, and then who would this be? The Braita is written by Rabbi Shimon HaTimni. Right? Obviously, the Braita doesn't go with our Mishnah because our Mishnah listed all these arayot that you do pay knas. So, right, and those are the ones karet. So this would be Shimon HaTimni. If you remember, there were three opinions. There was our Mishnah, which says only chayve mito beitin, kimle kicks in, right? We saw Rabbi Shimon HaTimni, who said the knas payment is only because it says below tielisha, she will marry, right? He has to marry her. It's only in a case where the marriage will be valid. And if there's mito beitin, if there's kritut, there's no valid marriage. If you create a marriage, right? You do a marriage, a harayat mekudesh ali, with someone who you're not allowed to, it's either going to be karet or mita beitin or death by the hands of the court. It's not a marriage at all, right? For example, you don't need a divorce. You're not even married. Whereas chayve lavim, kiddushin or tofsim, you might not be allowed to be married to them, but it is a valid marriage. So that's Rabbi Shimon HaTimni who draws the line there. Well, the next option is to say, arayot chayve mita beitin v'chayve kritut. That arayot includes both mito beitin and kritut. So what's shniot then? Shniot are chayve lavim. And then it's coming to say, even chayve lavim, you don't pay knas. Who does that match? That's the third opinion. Mani Rabbi Shimon ben Menassi, who said, below tielisha is kol ha'ra'oi l'kaima. Any woman, who, if you rape a woman, who you're allowed to stay married to. Now, if it's Kohen and a grusha, for example, a divorcee, you're not allowed to stay married. That's a lo taseh, but you can't stay married. Or a mamzer, you're not allowed to marry. You can't stay married to them if you did. So he thinks all of those are excluded from knas. So this Braita could theoretically be, according to him, or according to Rabbi Shimon Atimi. Okay, next line in the Braita. Mima'enet en la lo knas velo pitoy. Okay, again, what's a mima'enet? If the father can marry off a young woman, and right, his daughter when she's a ketana or a na'ara, and the marriage is valid on a Torah level. But if the father's not around or not alive and can't marry her off, the mother or the brother could do it, but it only has validity on a rabbinic level, which means because of that, we allow her to just say, I'm not interested in this man at some point when she gets older. She can say, I'm not interested in this man and get out of the marriage immediately without a get, without anything. This is only until a certain age. We're going to assume right now it's until, right? Normally it's 12 years and 2 sa'arot. Okay, it means she has simanim bagrut. So now, if that's the case, it says here, Mema'enet en la lo knas velo pitoy. Now, what did we say before? The Rabbi Meir and the rabbis disagree about what's the age in which a woman gets knas. According to Rabbi Meir, it's only that 6-month period when she's a na'ara. If she's younger than that, the father doesn't get knas for her. Or older than that also. According to the rabbis, even a ketana, you have to pay knas if you rape a ketana. So, mima'enet en la lo knas velo pitoy, a mima'enet is a woman who is married to someone by her mother or brother, decided to get out of it, and presumably, right, when she does that, she's still a ketana because she can't do it if she's older, right? So this seems to imply, and the point here is, she's not going to get knas, even though she normally would have, which is the inference of the Gemara. Ha ketana ba'al me'itle. If a mima'enet is a young girl, she's not yet an na'ara. That means that her counterpart is a young girl who hasn't done miyun yet, right? Meaning, if you did miyun, you're now precluded from getting the knas because we assume that you were married to this man and then you must have had relations with him. You're not a virgin anymore. But if you didn't do miyun, meaning, let's say you weren't even married off by your mother or your brother, then we assume that what? Then you get knas. But someone who does miyun is a ketana. She's a minor. And Rabbi Meir said that a minor doesn't ever get knas. So the inference from this is that, again, you have the mima'enet, who's a minor. She's in the stage of a ketana. And her parallel, right? She doesn't get knas, but someone parallel to her who didn't go through this process of miyun and didn't get married off by her mother or brother, she would get knas. But that doesn't match Rabbi Meir, which is kind of okay, but we're going to see. My Rabbanan, so this must be Rabbanan, da amrik tanayesh la knas. However, that's not going to work because of the next line. Ema seifa, continuation of the Braita says, Ailonit en la lo knas velo pitoy. An Ailonit doesn't have knas and doesn't have pitoy. Now, why does an Ailonit not get a knas? Because an Ailonit is a woman who doesn't ever have simanim that she's getting older, right? She basically never develops. At age, basically, she never has a stage of na'arut. Na'arut is only a stage where she reaches the age of 12 and she has 2 pubic hairs. That Ailonit never has that. So she skips the stage of na'arut and she goes straight to bagrut. When she gets to age 20, we just assume we call her a bogeret. Okay, even though, right, she doesn't have any simanim. So why does an Ailonit not have knas and not have pitoy? That must be Atala Rabbi Meir, Da'amar Ketana en la knas. Because an Ailonit either is a ketana or she's a bogeret. And a bogeret for sure doesn't get knas, and a ketana doesn't get knas according to Rabbi Meir. As soon as she finished ketanut, she went straight to beger. She skipped the stage of nara. And that's why she doesn't get knas. So we now have a problem. Reisha Rabbanan v'Sefer Rabbi Meir. The Mima'enet assumes that we're talking about a minor, which is Rabbanan's opinion. And the Sefer, which says an Ailonit doesn't have knas, would have to be Rabbi Meir, because the rabbis would say, of course an Ailonit could get knas. She's a ketana. So how do we explain this? We're going to have 4 attempts. The first one the Gemara already knows from the beginning is going to fail. And we'll see that a bunch of the other ones fail as well. But this one starts off as a failed attempt because it starts off b'chitema. And if you want to say, which always ends up with a rejection, if you want to say, kula Rabbi Meir hi, ubima'enet savalaki Rabbi Yehuda, maybe we hold it's all Rabbi Meir. The mima'enet part also. How could you explain that? Well, maybe he holds like Rabbi Yehuda, who actually thinks that a girl could do miyun at a later age, even during the time of Nahut. We're going to see that in a minute. But before we even see that, we're going to say, no way, no how can we say that Rabbi Meir holds like Rabbi Yehuda and the Mima'enet. Umi savarla, could he possibly hold that way? No way. V'hatanya, it says in a Braita, ad mataya bat b'ma'enet, until what stage can a girl do miyun? Ad shtavi she sa'arot, until she has 2 pubic hairs, divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir explicitly says, I hold until the age of Na'arut, not including Na'arut. So we can't possibly hold like Rabbi Yehuda, who we're going to see right now. Rabbi Yehuda omer, ad shireh shachor, yirbet shachor al halavan. Only once it's more black than white. What does this mean? It's talking about the area where she has pubic hairs growing. When she has 2 sarot, it's more white, more of her skin than the hairs. Once the hairs, now there's 2 interpretations. Either they just grow very long, that they cover most of the space, or that more hairs grow in their place and it's more dense, and then it looks more black than white. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the stage of Na'arut, you could still do miyun, but Rabbi Meir can't possibly hold like Rabbi Yehuda, so you can't possibly explain the whole thing like Rabbi Meir. So option number 2, Ela Rabbi Yehuda, maybe the whole bright is Rabbi Yehuda. Ubiktana savarlaka Rabbi Meir. Just like we tried to say, maybe Rabbi Meir holds like on the miyun issue like Rabbi Yehuda. Now we'll say the reverse. Maybe Rabbi Yehuda holds like Rabbi Meir on the age issue for knas, which would help us with the Ilonit case. And we can say, when it comes to miyun, that works very well because Rabbi Yehuda holds that she could be a na'ara, in which case it's basically saying a na'ara normally has knas, but the woman, the girl who does miyun doesn't have knas. But because she's presumed not to be a virgin. And when it comes to the Ilonit, he must say, oh, Ilonit and knas, because he holds like Rabbi Meir on that issue, right? There's 2 different issues here. So the problem is going to be Umi Savarla, but wait, we're going to see from elsewhere that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold like Rabbi Meir. Now, it's not going to be as clear a proof, but Rabbi Yehuda Amarav said on the Mishnah Mem Amud Bet. Okay, this Mishnah Mem Amud Bet, which we saw already this opinion and quoted in a Braita, but it's Rabbi Meir's opinion. The Mishnah is exclusively Rabbi Meir's opinion about the age, which is what we're trying to say. Maybe Rabbi Yehuda holds like this. If you can sell your daughter to be a slave, that's the age we're going to assume. When she's a ketana, then ein knas, then you don't get knas. And when you do pay the knas, because that's nara, ein mecher, that's not an age the father could sell the daughter. Ketana, and now we're going to say it explicitly. Ketana, a minor, yesh la mecher ve'en la knas. But nara, yesh la knas ve'en la mecher. And the Bulgarian doesn't get either. Okay. Anyway, that's the Mishnah. That Mishnah is clearly Rabbi Meir. Now, what does it say? Rabbi Yehuda said the name of Rav, Zo divrei Rabbi Meir. That Mishnah is Rabbi Meir. Now, how do we know that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold that way? Because in Ita, if Rabbi Yehuda held like Rabbi Meir on that issue, Rabbi Yehuda would have said in the name of Rav, Zo divrei Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda mebayele. It should have said, this is Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir, or Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. So the fact that he doesn't mention Rabbi Yehuda means Rabbi Yehuda probably doesn't hold that way. In which case, we're back to square one. Again, we have no way to reconcile these 2 lines in the Braita, because one seems to hold like Rabbanan about the issue of, or Rabbi Yehuda, I would say, about the issue of miyun, that miyun is past, right, is during the stage of Na'arut. And the other issue seems to hold like Rabbi Meir, that a ketana doesn't get knas ever. That's the Iloni. So, third answer. Hi, Tana, Savalaka Rabbi Meir Bachadu, Palagale Bachada. We can say it's a different Tana, not Rabbi Meir, not Rabbi Yehuda. It's some other Tana that came after, probably, and held like Rabbi Meir when it came to the Ketana issue, the Ketana and la Knas. But when it came to the Miyun issue, held disagreed with Rabbi Meir and held that you can even do Miyun when you're a Na'ara, you're older. So that's possibility 3, and that one is really a good possibility. Rav from Amar, he says, I disagree with the whole premise of this question. We assumed the mima'enet en la knas, but if it was a counterpart and it was an ara, right, it would have, or a ktana, which was the problem, because a ktana never has knas, according to Rabbi Meir. So what does he say? My mima'enet, ha're'uya l'ma'en. Right, and then the whole thing is Rabbi Meir. What do we say? Ha-mima'enet doesn't mean mima'enet. It means anyone who could theoretically do miyun according to Rabbi Meir. And when is that? When they're a ketana. And basically what he wants to say, in other words, is any ketana, not just one who does miyun, any ketana doesn't get knas because she's a ketana. Ketanot don't get knas. To which the Gemara says, well, that sounds very nice, but If he wanted to say ktana doesn't get knas, he should have just simply said ktana. He shouldn't call her hamima'enet. Mima'enet sounds like one who particularly did miu, not just one who's only a ktana. To which the Gemara says, you're right, kasha. This is in fact a difficulty. Okay, so we have 4 potential answers, and 3 of them, in fact, were at least possibility, right? 2 of them were really rejected, and the 4th one was just saying, well, it doesn't sound like a good possibility. Now we'll go to the Iloni. Iloni en lo knas velo pitui. So in Iloni, we already saw in the Braita, doesn't have knas, doesn't have pitui. Uremini. But wait, this contradicts another Braita. Hachereshet vashota. We've talked about the deaf. She doesn't hear and she doesn't speak. She's considered someone who doesn't have knowledge. And we've talked about this many times, that if you're new to the Masechet, maybe you're new to Ketubot, you haven't heard this, so I'll review. Generally, talk that today things might be very different nowadays, but in those days, they assumed someone can't speak and can't hear. It didn't have knowledge. Shota also not one of sound mind, okay, which could be, mental disabilities or not like bouts of insanity. Anyway, chereshet or shota v'ha'ilonit yesh lahem knas. Okay, number 1, they have knas. Which goes against what we just saw. Number 2, yesh lahem tanat betulim. Somebody claims against them. When I got married, I thought you were a betula, you were a virgin, and I gave you a 200 zuz, and now it turns out you're not. I want my money back, right? So he can claim that. So the Gemara says, I don't even know why you're asking. This is a contradiction. Hi, my lumia. It's true. One said yes and one said no, but we already just saw there's a machloket about this. Ha Rabbi Meir, ha Rabbanan. We can easily say the Mishnah that says she doesn't get knas is Rabbi Meir. The Braita. The Braita that says she does get knas is the rabbis who say even ketanot get knas. And an Ilonit is a ketanan. She should get knas. Right now, they're only focusing on the Ilonit part. So the Gemara, right, that's a pretty good answer to it, to the extent that the Gemara said, my karile. So what were they even thinking when they asked this question in the first place? To which they answer, Mishum they really brought the Braita not because of the first Braita. The second Braita was brought because of a contradiction between it and a third Braita. And now we're going to leave the Ilonit and focus on the Chereshet and the Shota. So the third Braita says, HaChereshet v'Shota, the 2 we saw before, and 2 others, a Bogeret, a woman who's beyond 12 and 6 months, and a Mukat Eitz, one who had an injury, right? That because of that, she tore her hymen. Ein lahem ta'anat betulim. They can't claim ta'anat betulim. Hasuma v'ha'ilonit, but the Suma and the Ilonit, here comes in the Ilonit, yesh lahem ta'anat betulim. Okay, this is, by the way, not talking anymore about knas. Okay, but you can claim that. Okay, so the chereshet shota bogeret mukat eitz, you can't claim, oh, I thought you were a virgin. Okay, you can't assume they were necessarily virgins and were lying to you maybe if they didn't, right? But if she's blind or she's an Ilonit, then you can claim betulim. Sumchus omer mishum Rabbi Meir, on this last halacha, Sumchus says in the name of Rabbi Meir, Suma ein latana betulim, a blind woman who gets married, the husband can't claim, I thought you were a virgin. When it turns out he finds out she's not, he doesn't have a claim. So we're going to have to understand all these different parts as we go on, so be patient. First thing they're going to deal with is the contradiction of the Chereshet and Shota, who in one source it says they have Tana Betulim, someone can make a claim against them. And the second one who says, no, they don't have any claim. Okay, the women are protected from any kind of Betulim claim. Oh, you aren't a virgin. So to which the Gemara answers, Amar of Sheshet, Lo Kashi. Not a difficulty. Ha Rabbanan, Ha Rabbi Yeshua. Okay, way back to earlier in the Masechet, there were a lot of cases where we saw they disagreed. If you remember, when it comes to Tana Betulim, if a woman says, Misha ne'erasti, ne'enasti, right? I was raped. It's true I don't have Betulim, but I was raped after we were already betrothed. So you have no claim on me. When we were betrothed, I really was a virgin. Since she can claim that, okay, comes Rabban Gamliel and he'll say, in our case, the Chereshet and the Shota, they can't make a claim themselves. So the court will claim that for them. Okay, basically a fascinating case, and we're going to talk about a little more within the next few lines of the Gemara. Basically, these women are helpless. They can't make their own claims. So the court is going to make a claim for them. Since if they were of sound mind, and they had knowledge, they'd be able to make a claim and claim, well, now it's a little bit weird, you might say, because what do you mean they could make a claim? Only if that was actually the truth. Okay, so it's a little bit of an interesting thing here. But the point is, they can't claim for themselves. The court's going to claim for them. And Rabbi Yeshua and the Braita that says they have Tana Betulim, that the husband can come up against them, That's Rabbi Yeshua, who says we don't believe the woman even if she says Mishaneres Tani Nasti, right? That I was raped after the engagement. We don't believe her anyway. So of course we're not going to believe these women, right? There's no reason. So to which the Gemara says, wait a minute. That's only if she comes forward with that claim. The whole reason she's believed is, if you remember, was because of amigo, because she could have said, I'm a mukat eitz, and that's why I had it was an injury. It had nothing to do with sexual relations, and therefore we're going to believe her. Well, but here, she didn't make her own claim, so we're going to go make a claim for her? What kind of craziness is this? To which the Gemara answers a fascinating line in since a regular woman would be believed, this is a case where we would say, open the mouth for those who can't speak. This is a great line, basically saying you have to take care of people who are in need. People who can't make their own claims, we have to make claims for them. We don't even know. It's fascinating because we don't even know if she was raped once the engagement happened. But we can assume that since she couldn't have a claim, she can't make a claim herself, we have to make any claim we can for her, and therefore no one can go claim betulim against her. It's a real way of protecting these women. Next case, habogeret ein latana betulim. So now we're already in Braita number 3, and we want to understand more of the cases in Braita number 3. So this bogeret has no tana betulim. Wait a minute, why not? Amarav, didn't Rav say bogeret notnim lalayla harishon? What is this talking about? And nowadays, after the first night, right, the husband and wife together, they have relations, they immediately have to separate because of the dam betulim, because of the blood from her hymen tearing. Now, that is what we call dam makah. That's not dam nida. They shouldn't really need to separate. The rabbis were strict. At a certain point, they decided we're going to make dam betulim treated kind of like dam nida, and they have to separate. But before those days, which is the days of Rav, was before that was instituted, dam betulim was treated as an injury. It's not blood that's uterine blood that's going to make a woman impure to her husband, and they have to separate. So therefore, he says, if a woman sees blood on the first night, if first of all, if she's not a virgin, then if she sees blood the first night, we have to assume it's dam nida, and they have to separate. So comes Rav and he says a bogeret, she's older but still a virgin, notnim lalayla harishon. She gets the whole first night, any kind of blood she sees, we assume that first night, let's say they had sex a number of times, that first night, any blood she sees is going to be considered dam betulim. Okay, now, what does that seem to imply? That a bogeret is still a virgin, which means that why not say, yesh latana betulim? If there is no blood, then the husband can come claim, hey, there was no blood, you're not a virgin. Moving now to Amabet, to which the Gemara answers, and you might remember we made this distinction in the beginning of the Masechet, if the husband comes forward and says, I know for a fact there was no blood, because he checked right away and saw no blood anywhere, then we believe him. However, in what case is a bogeret different from a younger girl? If he claims, if you remember, if a man didn't notice whether there was blood or not, so he has nothing to say about the blood because he doesn't have proof of it, but he does know, and how he knows this was a good question, but he knows that it wasn't very tight, the area where they were having relations. He could tell that it was stretched. Then we're going to say, if that's the case, that is a claim that does not hold any water to a bogeret, because the assumption is once the woman is grown up and is already past the age of na'arut, it's already, the area is no longer as narrow as it was, and a petach patuach claim is not accepted. Sumchus omer mishum Rabbi Meir. Now we're going to try to understand Sumchus, who said, Suma ein latana betulim. So why? My time it's Sumchus, just because she's blind, she still has da'at, she has knowledge, she can make claims. So what's the difference here? Why he says someone can't come claim against her that she wasn't a virgin. Amar Rabbi Zera mipnei shenechabetet al gabei karka. She falls a lot. Now we assume right now, why does she fall a lot? Because she's blind, she doesn't see things, she falls a lot. What does it mean she falls a lot? Well, if she falls a lot, she might have torn her hymen. To which the Gemara said, fascinating, interesting line, I think. All girls are clumsy, they all fall a lot. I don't know why they think all girls fall, but it's very common for a girl to fall. Maybe the point is it's very easy to tear your hymen by having some sort of accident. So they say, no, there's a difference because kulu ro'ot umarot iman. All those women who are not blind can see. So if they tear their hymen, they'll see blood and they'll know that they were bleeding. And they'll tell their mothers. Why is that relevant? You'll see in a minute. But this woman who's blind didn't see. So she might have fallen a number of times, but she has no idea that she tore her hymen. And then she doesn't tell her mother. So when her parents marry her off, they have no idea that she's not a virgin. So there was no false play here. The whole idea of this betulim is that I was duped into something. You told me you were a virgin and you're not. So if she were to fall and would know she had bled and it told her mother, we assume she told her mother, then her mother should have known when they arranged the marriage. They should have been honest about it. But if the mother didn't even know, and not only that, but she didn't even know, then nobody was trying to fake anyone out here, and therefore he can't claim I was duped by the family. Next case. Now we're going back to the first Braita. Okay, we've now explained all the cases in that third Braita where we had the contradiction, we resolved the contradiction, and then went into explaining the different cases. Now we're going back to the first Braita. Yosei mishum shemra, en lo knas velo pitu. So Yosei mishum shemra, the Gemara says, wait a minute. Yosei mishum shemra bat skilahi. What's the problem here? This woman is deserving of skila because forget about getting knas. Okay, now here it's a little bit tricky. Just want to check one thing here because there's an assumption here, right? The assumption is that the rape that happened, one second, let me just double check one thing before I say this. Sure that I'm right about this. Right. So the assumption here is that she is, she's chayavet skila. Okay. What does it mean? You're saying mishum shemra. It means shemra is when witnesses come and say you were with some other man while you were engaged. So she's for sure, there's proof that she was with some other man, in which case, for sure, the Braita doesn't need to say that she doesn't get knas. Of course she doesn't get knas. She was a bi'ula. Right? So for sure, that's not an issue. So if somebody rapes a woman who's yotzei mishum shemra, of course she have relations. So that's not a question. So, and then you don't need the Braita to tell you that. It's obvious. Amar Rav Sheshet hachikam. Sheshet means this is what it means. Mi sheyatza alaha shem ra b'yalduta, en la lo knas velo pitui. A woman who there were rumors going around about her that she slept around. A woman like that doesn't, if she's raped by someone, she doesn't get knas, she doesn't get pitoy, because again, there's an assumption that she's a bi'ula, that she's already not a virgin. And again, remember, it says in Psukim, she has to be a virgin, right? The Psukim of the rape and the payment are all about a woman who's a virgin. Amar Papa, Shmamina, you can infer from here, Hai shtara rea lo magbina be. Papa says you can infer from here that a shtar rea, that if there's a shtar where there's suspicion of right, that people think that this guy forges documents, he can't collect. A person who's under suspicion that he forges documents can't collect his shtar. To which the Gemara, so we have two things here. We have Rav Sheshet saying it about a woman who's suspected of having slept around, isn't believed, and Rav Papa applies that to a person who has a document who's suspicious of having forged documents, he's not believed either. So it's the same thing, basically. He's saying you can derive it from here. So, hey, Chindami, what's the case? If you're going to say there's rumor that this document was a forged document, which the comparison to our case would be, again, like we thought before, that there's rumor that she slept around. But Rav already told us, people, now this is a totally different topic, but it has to do with the same thing. A Kohen can't marry a Zonah. But if there's rumors that this woman slept around, we don't worry about those rumors. We allow a Kohen to marry her. We don't believe rumors. So if that's the case, we shouldn't believe rumors in either of these cases. So that doesn't make any sense. It must be with the woman that two witnesses came and said, she tried to seduce us. Okay, this woman tried to bring us into her bed to have relations with her. We didn't, we stood up to the, to her. We didn't do anything, but she seduced us, tried to seduce us. And then you can assume that she probably seduced other men and they slept with her. And what's the comparison by documentation? To two people came and said, listen, this guy who's now pulling out this shtar, he tried to get us to falsely sign a document of his, which means now we're going to suspect that the people who did, we didn't sign, but he obviously was looking for people to sign falsely, which means he's suspicious that this guy gets people to sign documents falsely. To which the Gemara said, wait a minute, those aren't really the same. This is an interesting comparison. Men, it's always easy to find men who want to sleep around with women. Their desires are strong. And therefore, if the woman's looking around for a man to sleep with, she probably found someone, in which case we can assume she's not a virgin. But just because this guy's trying to find false witnesses, who's to say he's going to find people who are willing to sign on his document? First of all, false witnesses is less, maybe he's offering the money. Maybe that's a big, draw, but it's harder, right? They don't get any self-benefit out of it, like by having sexual relations with this woman. So again, one could argue, maybe it's the same, maybe it's different. It's a good question, but they want to differentiate and say it's not so true. To which, right, it's not a fair comparison, in which case Rav Papa can't necessarily infer what he inferred from Rav Sheshet. To which the Gemara said, if he was really trying to find people who were willing to forge, if he couldn't find, he might have just forged the signatures himself. So therefore, he's really not believed, just like the woman is not believed as well. Okay, new Mishnah. We're finally getting to the next Mishnah, which talks about the women who don't have knas. Elu she'en lahem knas. Habal, and here it's going to be the comparison to the previous Mishnah. Habal giyoret v'ala shvuya v'ala shifcha, convert, a woman who was redeemed, or a slave, a maid servant, shenifdu v'shenitgayru v'shenishachru, right, that were redeemed, or converted, or freed. Okay, right, the order's a little off, as it was in the previous one as well, right, it should be nitgayru, nifdu, or nishtachru. Yiterot abanot shalosh shanim v'yom echad. This time, this all happened, that they converted or got free, became Jewish, whatever it might be, after the age of 3. And then there's suspicion that if they were raped, right, the rape would be considered legitimate rape, in which case they can't right now. What's the issue here? They won't get knas in our case because we assume they're not virgins. Again, big question, right? Is this fair to assume? That's a whole separate question. But right now, you have to take what the Gemara says. That's the assumption. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Shvuya sheniftet harei b'kedushata af al pi shegzola. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda says a woman who was redeemed, we don't hold in the same category as a giyoret or a shivcha. Okay, they were not Jewish at the time, and therefore there's suspicion. But when it comes to the shvuya, we assume maybe she protected herself, maybe right she prevented herself from getting raped, or there's just not a high likelihood that she was raped. So even if she's older, right, even if she's over 12. Habal bito, the next cases in the Mishnah where you don't get knas, these are all the cases where we saw mito beiti, right? Someone who sleeps with his daughter, al bat bito, his granddaughter, al bat beno, right? His granddaughter through his son or his daughter, al bat ishto, his wife's daughter, al bat bena, and her son's daughter, and al bat bita, and her daughter's daughter. Ein lehem knas mipnei shemitchayev benafsho. All those arayot are liable by the death penalty. So therefore, shemitatam bidei beitin, the court imposes the death penalty. This is the famous kimle that we've been talking about. Anyone who's liable for death penalty doesn't pay money. Here, interestingly, they're bringing a pasuk, even though we know this other pasukim, we'll get to that later. If the child isn't killed, right, the fetus, so the two men are fighting, and the woman gets in the middle, a pregnant woman, they kill her baby, so they pay money. But if she gets killed, then there's no monetary payment because because they're liable the death penalty for killing her. So now we're going to have two interpretations of Rabbi Yehuda, and then we're going to have questions on each. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Dosa Amru Dabar Echad. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Dosa both hold the same thing. Rabbi Yehuda Adam Aram, that a shvuya, right, stays b'kedushata, and Rabbi Dosa Detanya shvuya uchela b'truma. A shvuya who's married to a Kohen can continue to eat truma even if she was raped. So now, or maybe even if she's a bat Kohen, right? Even if she's the daughter of a Kohen, she can continue to eat truma, even though a bat Kohen who's considered a beula can't. Okay, that would mess her up. If she were raped, she couldn't eat truma anymore. We don't assume that a shvuya is raped. So both of them say the same thing. They both basically assume shvuya is not raped. Rabbi Yehuda for the knas issue, and right? That she's a betula still, so she gets knas, and Rabbi Dosa for the truma issue. Amar Rabbi Dosa. Here Rabbi Dosa is going to explain. You might not like his language, but b'chima asala Aravi halaz. What did this Aravi man do to this woman? Because he touched her between her breasts. In other words, maybe he touched her body, but it doesn't mean he raped her. Okay, we're not going to disqualify her from kiuna just because he touched her. Okay, assumption that didn't go on necessarily. They weren't raping women. So that's Rabbi Yochanan's approach, that according to Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Dosa, they both think that this woman wasn't really raped. That's the assumption. Next option, Amar Rabba, Dilmalohi, maybe not, he says. I'm going to split between the two. These are two different issues. One is for the purposes of the knas, and one is for the purposes of eating truma. Maybe you'll say that they don't each agree with each other. Maybe in the rape case, he said, listen, we don't want to let the rapist benefit by not having to pay knas. If we find some way to make him pay the knas, we're going to find it. Basically, he did something terrible. We don't want to exempt him from this payment. So therefore, if it's a chance, we don't know. Let's just say maybe she wasn't raped, in which case we're going to make that guy, again, maybe she wasn't raped when she was a shvuya. Now she got raped. We're going to make the rapist pay for it. Elahatam. But when it comes to truma, we might not allow her to eat truma. Rabbanit Michelle Farber. Maybe Rabbi Yehuda holds like the rabbis that we're not going to allow her to eat truma. Okay, because there's no issue of lo yechoten iskav there. Inami, alternative, or from the flip side, you could also say, Rabbi Dosa could say, I don't even hold like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Dosa could say, listen, when it comes to truma is a rabbinic issue. Because truma, again, we saw a whole machloket about it. Truma nowadays, many people hold is rabbinic only. So if truma is rabbinic, we'll be lenient. We'll let her eat truma. But when it comes to knas, does he have to pay the knas? That's a doraita issue. We're going to assume, yes, she could have been raped, and let's exempt him from the payment of knas. So therefore, maybe they would disagree with Rabbi Yehuda in that case. Rabbi Dosa would disagree. Amalei Abai. So the first question we're going to have is on Rab. Abai says, wait a minute. You think he doesn't really believe that she wasn't raped. It's just he's going to say, we don't want rape. We don't know, let's say 50-50. So we're not going to let this rapist get away without paying his knas. So we're going to make him pay. Well, Hatanya, there's a brighter that says, Rabbi Yehuda, she stays in her sanctified state, meaning we assume she's not a non-virgin. She is a virgin. Afilu bat eser shanim, even if she's 10 years old. Why they say 10 is a good question, but let's leave it right now. Even if she's 10 years old, tuba tamatayim, she still gets her full tuba as a virgin. Now, hatam shaloye niskal, there's no person who did something evil here. We're having a woman who goes to get married. She happened to have been a shvuya. She was taken into captivity. We don't know if she was raped or not. We're going to assume she wasn't and give her a full ksuba. What's our ulterior motive here? There's no, let's make him pay the knas because he was sinning. There's no such thing as that here. To which they answer, Hatam nami dilma mimane velo nasbila. Here we do have an ulterior motive. What is it? Maybe he won't want to marry her because he'll say, oh, she was taken into captivity. Again, we're going to see how the rabbis go out of their way to say we don't want these women to be in vulnerable positions. If people know that they were taken into captivity and they'll think, the halacha says, we assume you're raped and your ketubah is only 100, it's going to make her look less important in the eyes of a potential husband. Even though, on the one hand, he's paying less money, but he's not going to want to pay the less money. He wants the higher valued woman. So therefore, we're going to assume for those purposes, theoretically, Rabba could say, again, this is Rabba's interpretation of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda's whole approach is we want to protect the woman from either we want to penalize a rapist, or we want to make sure this woman gets married. So we're going to say, for all intents and purposes, even though we don't really know, we'll just assume she wasn't raped. But Rabbi Yochanan thinks no. Rabbi Yehuda really believes she wasn't raped. So now, Sava Rabbi Yehuda, Bikdushatai Kaima, according to Rabbi Yochanan now, does Rabbi Yehuda really hold that she's Bikdushata? That meaning we're sure she's not raped? Vahatanya, in other words, this isn't Rabba, this is Rabbi Yochanan's interpretation of Rabbi Yehuda. He and Rabbi Dosa both hold the same thing, right? We don't assume she was raped. But it says here in a bright time, we're going to have some trouble understanding this bright till we finally get to the end of today's daf. We'll understand it fully. One who redeems a woman from captivity is allowed to marry her. Now, what we mean here is a Kohen, because a Kohen can't marry a woman who was raped. So a Kohen who redeems a shvuya is allowed to marry her. Meiba, and if right now we're assuming the person who redeemed her testifies that nothing happened, and I know for sure she wasn't raped, lo yisen, then he can't. Which doesn't really make any sense. Don't worry, we're going to ask about it in a second. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ben kach ben kach lo yisen. Rabbi Yehuda says it doesn't matter either which way, whether he was the one who whether he redeemed her or he redeemed her and testified about her. Either which way, he can't marry her. To which the Gemara asks, wait a minute. Haguf Akasha, the first line makes no sense. First you said, if he redeems her, he can marry her. And then you said, if he testifies, he can't. I understand. If he redeemed her, he could, but if he redeemed her and then testified about her, he couldn't. That makes no sense. Just because he added testimony is going to make it worse for him. Halokasha. That's not a question. This is the way it reads. The first case is he redeems her and testifies about her, and then, of course, he can marry her. But if he just testifies about her, he didn't redeem her. He just comes and testifies, lo yisa'ena, he can't marry her. So we still don't fully understand that opinion, but hold off, we'll get there. But mikama kasha the Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda said either which way he's not believed, meaning we assume she was raped. How so? That goes against what we said Rabbi Yehuda says. Amar Papa. So first answer is Papa. Ema Rabbi Yehuda Omer ben kach ben kach yisa'ena. Change it. Rabbi Yehuda didn't say lo yisa'ena. He said either which way you can marry her because we don't assume she was raped. That's the first easy answer. Second answer, Rav Huna B'reit Rabbi Yoshua Omer lo olam kedikatan. Really, he says lo yisa'ena. What does it mean though? Rabbi Yehuda l'divrei de Rabbanan Karmelu. They were talking according to the shita of the rabbis, meaning like this. Lididi, he says to them, according to me, ben kach ben kach yisa'ena, I don't think she ever gets raped when she's in captivity. So I think he can marry her no matter what. But ela liditchu, but according to you, ben kach ben kach lo yisa'ena mebaile. Either which way, he shouldn't marry her because the concern is maybe he's just trying to redeem her so he can marry her, and he's not believed. In other words, whether he testifies about her or whether he just redeems her, either which way, he's suspect that he's doing this just because he wants to marry her. And he doesn't care if she was raped, but he's a Kohen and we can't allow him to marry a woman if she was raped. So again, Rabbi Yehuda himself doesn't think it's a problem, but according to the rabbis, he's saying it should be a problem either which way. The Rabbanan will say to him, the rabbi's answer is, why? We're going to distinguish between if he redeemed her or if he didn't redeem her. If he redeemed her, he put money where his mouth is, as we say. People don't just put money down for no reason. It must be he really knew, and therefore we believe him. He must have checked it out that she really wasn't raped, and therefore we believe him, because if he already put money down to redeem her, it must be he was serious about her, and it must be he must have checked. But we're just worried if he just comes forward and testifies about her, he just fell in love with this woman, but it turns out she's a shvuya and there's concern she was raped, he might just lie and testify just to get out. Once he puts money down, we're assuming he's not going to lie. You can debate whether this is true or not. Again, so do Rabbi Yehuda and the rabbis, so there's room for debate. With that, we'll end today's daf. Have a great day, everybody. Meet up tomorrow.